Hi guys, so for today's video I'm very excited because I've been wanting to do this video for so long, but I had a lot of reading to do before I could do it, and that would be the Brandon Sanderson reading order for all of his Cosmere books. For those of you that don't know, all of Sanderson's adult fantasy books are a part of a shared universe, and that shared universe is called the Cosmere. The tie-ins from one series to the next are pretty minor, and Brandon Sanderson even says himself on his website that as long as you read the books from, book 1, book 2, book 3 in chronological order within a series, that you can read all of his different adult books in any order you want to. It's not ultimately going to ruin anything for you, but there are some little tiny minor details that might be kind of fun to know about if you read certain books before others. For today's video, I'm only going to be talking about his main books in the Cosmere. I'm not going to be talking about the short stories, but if you guys want me to make another video where I include the reading order with everything that he's put out in the Cosmere, I'd be happy to do that. I just have a little more reading to do. There are a few different reading orders you can try out. I'll tell you the pros and cons of each one of them, and the first one is just to read his books in publication order. At the time that I am filming this, if you want to do it in publication order, you would start with Elantris. Then from there you have the entire First Era Mistborn books, which would be The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. From there you have the current standalone book Warbreaker. After that you'd be followed up with Stormlight Archive Book 1, which would be Way of Kings. Then from there things get a little bit back and forth. You then go to the first book in the Mistborn Second Era, which would be Alloy of Law. Then we jump back to Stormlight Archive with Words of Radiance, which is the second book in that series, and then after that we go into the second and third books in the Mistborn Second Era, which would be Shadows of Self and the Bands of Mourning. And then lastly you get the giant tome Oathbringer, which is the third book in the Stormlight Archive series. For any of you that had a hard time keeping up with all those different changes, I will have the entire publication order in the description box down below so you have easy access to it. Pros and cons of reading the books in publication order I think are fairly obvious. The pros being you're going to see Sanderson go from where he started with his writing to where he is now, because of course authors are always going to be getting better as they go. Another pro to reading the books in this order is that you're not going to miss any of those tiny little hints that are throughout the Cosmere that lead up to his most recent books. The cons though, as you could see towards the end of that list, Sanderson's Stormlight Archive books are so massive that he just can't write those back to back. He kind of has to break them up with other projects. So rather than being able to go from one book in the series to the next, if you want to do straight true publication order, you kind of have to start breaking them up. The other con is that maybe Sanderson's publication order, if you start with Elantris and you don't really like Elantris, it might turn you off to reading some of Sanderson's other works, and that would be a bummer because for me, I think Elantris might be my least favorite. So it's difficult to power through if you don't think you like his style very much, because his style does change. The next reading order I'm going to show you are for those of you that would prefer to keep all the series together as close as possible so you don't have to break up a series and then start a different book. Doing that, you would still start with Elantris, and then that would be followed up with the First Era Mistborn books, because like you saw before, these all were written one after the other. From there you have a couple different options. I'm going to show you both. One is if you want to just stick with Mistborn and keep going, you can then start the Second Era Mistborn books. As you can see, these ones are much smaller, but they're also very different in tone and overall feel. So if you end up adoring the First Era books, you may need a break for a little bit before you come back into Mistborn, and if you want that break, instead of going right into the Second Era books, you can read Warbreaker in between. If you want to read Warbreaker in between and you want even more time before you start the Second Era books, that's when you can switch over to Stormlight Archive, because not only are each of the individual books long, but it's projected to be a 10-book series, so you're gonna have some time to wait. So you can read these, and then to fill you up with your Sanderson cravings, you can then kind of start the Second Era books until the next Sanderson release. I think this modified publication order reading list is better because the pros are basically exactly the same. The cons though, again, are that you're starting with Elantris, and Elantris, I would say, writing-wise, it's not weak by any means, but I think something that's really strong about Sanderson's writing is his ability to make you feel really connected to the characters, and that very first book of his for me, I felt the least connected to. That said, I'm going to now give you my personal opinion about the reading order that you should make for Sanderson's books. I think this order is the best of both worlds. You're not going to miss out really on any of those little details because I don't really think Elantris has too many of those, but at the same time, you're going to get a better idea of what Sanderson's books are like, what his worlds are like, his magic, his voice, and his writing. If you're the kind of person that just wants to kind of dip your toes in and get an idea without a huge commitment, I would say you should start with Warbreaker. Warbreaker definitely doesn't have a ton of action like some of the other books in Sanderson's Cosmere, but it's got a lot of intrigue. It's, I think, the fastest paced as far as you are intrigued from the beginning, and there's so much intrigue that you're constantly wanting to know what happens next, so it makes you want to flip the page. There's not a lot of huge buildup. There's not a lot of, we have to introduce this huge cast of characters in this absolutely enormous world. It's not anything like that, so I think it's a little easier to get into. As of right now, it's also a standalone, so that's beneficial for those of you that just want to get an idea. It's just one and done. And going along with that, I think this one has the most humor consistently throughout, which makes it a slightly lighter read than maybe some of the epic kind of dramatic, intense, tragic stuff that happens in some of the other ones. Speaking of tragic and epic, I think the best option from Warbreaker is to go into the First Era Mistborn books. The only reason that I am not recommending the First Era Mistborn books before Warbreaker is because, one, it's a trilogy, so it might be a little bit more daunting to get into it. But on top of that, the first book in the Mistborn series, while most people absolutely love it, I don't know that I was on the hype train yet when I had only read the first book. I thought it was good, I enjoyed it, I thought it was unique, the magic system was awesome. The last chunk of the first book is really fast paced, but the build-up that it takes to get to that last chunk, it's a little slow. From there, I would actually recommend just taking a chill pill and not jumping straight into the Second Era Mistborn books. And that's because, like I said before, the First Era books have such a different tone. So I think to prevent people from, not that they're bad, but to prevent people from being disappointed that it's not really the same, it's good to have a break between First Era and Second Era. What I would recommend next, you could read Elantris if you wanted, but I would say now that you know, you've read 4 of Sanderson's books, and if you liked them and you realize like, yeah, I like these books a lot, if you're at that point, I would start Stormlight Archive. You can either read all of the Stormlight Archive books that are out, which would be Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, and Oathbringer, and then read Elantris and Second Era Mistborn to hold you over until the next Stormlight Archive book comes out. Or you can break up each of the massive books in Stormlight Archive by reading one of the little Second Era Mistborn books or reading Elantris. The con to this reading order is that you're not reading Elantris before the other ones, and Elantris is his very, very first book in the Cosmere, so there's that. However, from one series to the next in the Cosmere, I'd say the books that relate to each other the most would be Warbreaker and then the Stormlight Archive books, and with this reading order, you're still going to end up reading this one before Stormlight. The pros, I think, is that you're starting with a fun, really well written, really good representation of Sanderson's writing standalone, so it gives you a better idea if you like his writing without having to get thrown into a series or get thrown into a series that isn't completed yet. Also, it allows you to go straight from Mistborn into Stormlight Archive, which are my 2 favorites by Sanderson, and then you can break up Stormlight Archive with the smaller books, or you can wait and read all of Stormlight Archive and then read the other books in anticipation for his next Stormlight Archive book, so it gives you a little more flexibility while still allowing you to go from one amazing series into the next. Anyway, that is it for the possible different reading orders for all of Sanderson's Cosmere books. Let me know which reading order you guys are most likely going to try out. Let me know if you've already read them, which ones you would do, which ones you would recommend. And of course, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. And if you want me to do this video again once I've read all of these short stories and novellas, let me know that too. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the little bell icon to get notified when I post new videos, and check out some more of my videos right over here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.